Well, and once you start delving into some of the details of these polls, like firstly that media consumption thing I spoke about, in the Fox News poll, what's the most important issue, according to people, even after the change in candidate? Immigration. Then daylight second, then it was inflation first, then daylight, then immigration, then we start getting down to single digits. So the issues are still on Trump's side, the betting market's still on Trump's side, the capacity to fight back well and truly there. But I've got to say, again, watching your show as I always do, listening to it on Sirius XM, and I know this is sort of part of the sickliness of the Kamala campaign, but the cringe factor of not just the media suck up, but what they're putting out there, like, great good luck, drag queens for Kamala, but white dudes for Kamala, Karens for Kamala. Like, these were all people who were going to vote for Joe Biden anyway, but they're being presented as if they have returned to the fold.
Those calls, white dudes for Kamala and the women, the Karens for Kamala, I mean, it is absolutely stomach turning to listen to what the Democratic Party has become. I grew up in a Democratic household. My parents were Democrats. My dad was a professor and my mom was a nurse. And they always felt like Republicans were for rich people, and we weren't rich. And so we were Democrats. We weren't particularly ideological, but we were Catholic. So we weren't, liberal on every issue. In any event, that was how a lot of families were. They were sort of moderate Democrats who weren't particularly far left wing. They just sort of voted Democrat because they thought it would be better for them economically. What that party has become is unrecognizable. Did you see the woman on the women who's saying, like, God forbid you correct a BIPOC, meaning person who's black or indigenous or a person of color. If you're white and a black person or a Native American heritage person says something that's wrong, you're not allowed to correct them or you're racist. Sorry, but I don't agree. And I will be correcting BIPOC people or white people, whether they're the future president of the United States or my neighbor. And it's disrespectful to treat them like they're so eggshell skinned that you can't point out when they say something that's stupid or wrong. This is how the left looks at people of color. It's racist. And they don't even see it. They think they're the elevated ones trying to lecture the rest of us into being, inclusive and kind. And none of that is true. So that's what the Democrats have become. And as I point out, the party that is parading, naked trans people on the White House lawn. Some guy in our nuclear department who was stealing women's luggage so he could wear our dresses. Yeah. Some guy who's parading himself out there as like the first female to be a part of the HHS cabinet. No, he's a man who lived 55 years as a man and then declared himself a trans person and now wants to trans your kids. There's nothing normal or non-weird, to steal their term, about any of this. And what's happened now, like with the pylon and J.D. Vance, it's actually kind of interesting, Paul, back to that, is they almost seem like they can't, or for right now don't, want to go after Trump in the ways that they used to, because the man is 14 days after taking a bullet to his head while he's out there campaigning. And so they almost, you can sense, feel a little bit chagrined about unleashing their cannons on him in the way they have in the past. Hitler, racist, misogynist, all the things. They're kind of holding their fire a bit because he took actual fire. He's still got a scar on his ear. And so they seem to be turning it all on J.D. Vance as like the stand-in for Donald Trump. I just don't think that's going to work. I don't think people don't vote for a ticket because of the vice presidential nominee. Trump remains the 800-pound gorilla in the race. And Trump, I think, will define this race one way or the other, right? Still, whether it's Kamala across from him or Joe Biden across from him. And all they've done by subbing in candidates is even out things. They were hemorrhaging because of Joe Biden for good reason. And now we've gotten back to stasis, where really Trump will wind up defining this race one way or the other. And the Democrats, their hatred for him will also define the race, right? There are more and more who are open-minded to Donald Trump because of the economy, because of immigration. And we've got, 90 plus days to figure out just how strong the feelings are on him.
And look, you know, again, this will be interpreted as disrespectful, but it's just media analysis here, which is if Biden was allowed to talk about Beau Biden every day of his presidency and his candidacy, I reckon Donald Trump's allowed to talk about being shot at for at least a couple more weeks. He might be allowed to do that, despite the fact the FBI was sort of playing hokey pokey. Was he shot? Wasn't he shot? Was it shrapnel? Wasn't it bullets? I mean, that was garbage. But before we go, the Olympics. Are you sitting, leaning forward and enjoying the messages coming back from Paris? Because I thought it was about sport.
I'm so sick of Christians being the punching bag for every sporting event or leftist event. We're the one group who they feel absolutely fine attacking over and over in the most vile terms. And I know people have heard this before, but it bears repeating. Can you imagine if they had done what they did with the Last Supper, with Islam, with the Prophet Muhammad? There'd be murders. There wouldn't just be riots in the street. People would die. But you can take aim at Catholics and Christians because we're godly people who aren't going to take to the streets and shed blood over this kind of disrespectful, blasphemous depiction of the things that are important and sacred to us. It's absolutely disgusting. And you know what's such a joke is like they do this and parade all these naked, disgusting people. One guy actually showed a testicle. Okay. I don't need to see somebody's testicle when I'm watching the opening of the games with my children. Keep your testicles in your pants. They parade all of this out there trying to be inclusive. Inclusive of whom? The LGBTQ crowd? That's who you want to send a message to, which is what? You know, less than 10% of the average world population. What about Christians? How about the billions of Christians that are, you don't want to send anything to them saying, you know, we appreciate and respect you too? And by the way, it's Paris, France. I don't think that the LGBTQ crowd is feeling ignored or loathed. That's a crowd that's, you know, had representation there on the stages of the cabarets for decades. They don't need any particular messaging. And so I do think the one upshot of having stuck the finger in the eye yet again of not just the Christian right, but the Christian community globally is as we go into an election year here in America, it gives the Christian voters yet another reason to consider whether they want to back these leftists who do not share the same values or worldview as just the normies who are remaining in America and worldwide. I'm disgusted by it. I'm disgusted by the fact that I've got to watch men parading as women, not just in the opening ceremonies, but in the games themselves. And I think at this point, my only prayer is that no female athlete who's actually competing over there, because keep in mind, the IOC said it's up to the individual sport to determine whether a man can compete as a woman, gets hurt. That's what I want to avoid seeing. It's one thing you pull your calf on the sideline when you're Simone Biles competing for USA Gymnastics. It's quite another when you're going into the boxing ring as an actual female and you got to face somebody who's got more testosterone than you do, Paul, out there trying to punch you in the face as a female. It shouldn't happen. It's going to happen. And my prayer is that it remains safe somehow for the actual biological women who just want to compete.